Hello, my lovely listeners. I'm Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns. Welcome to this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. Gorgeous listeners, I am here today with another legend in the low carb space, a person who I have long admired and listened to, and a wealth of information. But you know what? Not just information, because information by itself is boring. He presents it in a way that is entertaining. So I'm sure today you are going to love listening to Dr. Peter Brukner, who is, as I said, a legend in the low carb space, but more importantly, has two things that he's passionate about with his charity called Sugar by Half and his program called Defeat Diabetes. Welcome to the podcast, Pete.
Thanks for having me, Lucy.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I thought, look, I'm hoping most of our listeners will have heard of you, but in case they haven't, or in case they don't know your whole story, give us a little bit of background on who you are and how you found your way to low carb.
Okay, yeah, we all have different journeys, don't we? So my background is totally different. I mean, I'm a sports medicine physician. So basically, I've spent the whole of my career really looking after athletes, both elite athletes, but more commonly just everyday people who injure themselves. So I've had a sports medicine clinic in Melbourne for the last 30 years or so. It's grown to be the largest one in the country. And I've looked after a whole bunch of different sporting teams over the years, from AFL teams to national sporting teams, national swimming, athletics, hockey, soccer. I did a couple of Olympic Games with the Australian team, did a World Cup soccer campaign and tournament in South Africa in 2010. After that, I went to Liverpool, England, to work with the Premier League club there for a couple of years as the head of sports medicine, sports science. Then did 5 years with the Australian cricket team as their team doctor, travelling around, did 51 tests in a row, and had an amazing time with that. I have to point out that I did finish prior to their little indiscretions in South Africa, so clearly they were missing my moral guidance there. But and since then, I've sort of wound down my sport, because I developed probably an even more important passion, and that was nutrition. I dabbled in nutrition years ago. I actually co-authored the first sports nutrition book in Australia with a dietitian, and that's way back 40 years ago. And then I sort of lost a bit of interest in nutrition. Sports nutrition got pretty boring. It was just all about carbs and Gatorade and Powerade and all that sort of stuff, and pasta parties the night before the marathon and things. So, but about 10 years ago, I had a sort of a bit of a life-changing experience. I'm good friends with Tim Noakes, who I've known Tim for many years, and Tim started talking about, as many of your listeners know, Tim's been a real pioneer in this whole low-carb, healthy fat sort of diet side of things, and Tim, started coming out talking about this, and I thought, oh, Tim, come on, you've lost the plot, mate. You really, this is just one step too far. But Tim's a super smart guy, and he's actually challenged a few of the sort of tenets of sports science over the years, and he's been proven right every time. So I thought, no, I need to look into this. So I read a book by Gary Taubes called Good Calories, Bad Calories, and I guess in a way that was the book that changed my life, really, because not only did it talk about the sort of the relative merits of fats and carbs, but it talked about the politics of how the low fat movement had won out over the low carb movement, which I'd always assume was due to, good science and evidence and so on, and turns out to be due to the usual combination of, money, politics and power. And that really blew me away. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed in Liverpool and having just read, a chapter of that book and thinking, nah, it couldn't be. We couldn't have had this whole thing wrong for 40 years. The whole of Western society has been on a low-fat diet. And here's this book suggesting that it's all based on rubbish. I found it quite disturbing. And anyway, cut a long story short, I decided I'd do a little experiment of my own. Decided I'd do a 3-month sort of pseudo-scientific trial of weighing myself, getting all my bloods done and things. And that just had a dramatic effect. I was quite overweight. I was probably borderline obese. I'd had a fatty liver for years. I had a strong family history of type 2 diabetes. I had high triglycerides, I had high insulin. I was, if you'd asked me how I was, I'd have said, yeah, I'm fine, but clearly I was metabolically quite unwell, and I was, in retrospect, pre-diabetic. And I have no doubt that had I stayed the way I was, I'd be fully fledged diabetic within a couple of years probably. But anyway, cut a long story short, 3 months of this diet, lost 13 kilograms, reversed all my metabolic abnormalities. My fatty liver that I'd had for 10 years completely disappeared, has been gone ever since. all my other abnormalities gone. Felt fantastic. Exercised better, slept better, concentrated better. At the end of that 3 months, you think, wow, this is unbelievable. So then I guess since then I've sort of become an advocate and a passionate advocate for this way of living. I threw myself into it. I've read everything I can get my hands on and started talking about it. And then we started this charity you mentioned, Sugar by Half, with an aim to try and reduce the amount of added sugar that Australians eat. They're probably now about 18, 20 teaspoons of added sugar a day. And the World Health Organization suggests no more than 6. So we've got a fair way to go. So we've got some really good programs for schools and things. Yeah.
I was reading a stat that said teenage boys seem to be the highest sugar consumers, are eating 38 teaspoons a day. By the time they're adding in, usually.
It's pretty scary. Yeah, well, you've only got to have a couple of cans of Coke, and you're up there, aren't you?
Well, even for them, I think they've been marketed to do with energy drinks. And, they're all drinking.
Yeah, that's true.
All of those things, thinking, again, they're all tired.
Yep, and all full of sugar. Yeah, so we started Sugar by Half, and that's focused mainly on schools programs. We've got a whole bunch of school lessons that are available for teachers to teach and so on. So that's been good. Put my first book out, or first of the nutrition books. I've actually written 13 books, I think, by now. But this is my first. This part was A Fat Lot of Good. Came out about 4 years ago, and that sold really well. And then we started our Defeat Diabetes program a couple of years ago, and that's been going along nicely. And just recently put out my latest book, which is the Diabetes Plan, which is basically everything you need to know about tackling type 2 diabetes.
Yes, which is a brilliant book, and certainly anybody that has type 2 diabetes or has anyone in their family, or even if you have a family history, basically it's almost should be like every family should have this book, because we know that the rates of type 2 diabetes are skyrocketing. It's more and more common. It's an expensive disease, not just for the community, but for the individual. They end up on multiple medications, and it really impairs life quality.
Yeah, it's all those complications. I think one of the reasons, type 2 diabetes is basically ignored. I don't know why. I think it's the biggest single health issue in our country. There's 2 million Australians with type 2 diabetes, 2 million, and probably another 2 million with pre-diabetes. So if you look at the over 40 population, which I calculated the other day, I think it was 14 million. So 4 out of 14 million, is a pretty substantial, proportion of the population. And my feeling is I've often sort of wondered why it's sort of relatively ignored like we've had a pandemic that stopped the whole world for the last few years, and yet arguably type 2 diabetes is an even bigger issue, but which we ignore. But I think it's because people don't die of type 2 diabetes. But what people don't realise is that type 2 diabetes is the major cause of most chronic diseases. So it's the major cause of blindness, the major cause of amputations, the major cause of dementia and Alzheimer's, kidney disease, heart disease. It's the biggest single factor in all these diseases is type 2 diabetes. So it mightn't kill you itself, but it will lead to all the chronic diseases that we're just so prevalent in our society. So we've got to attack the root cause, which is it's just the type 2 diabetes. And because as you know, if you have high blood sugar, which is what happens in type 2 diabetes, that damages the lining of arteries. And as we know, arterial disease is the cause of all those diseases. So it's not surprising, but it just goes under the radar. And I just, it frustrates the hell out of me that no one's talking about it. And I guess that's why I kept waiting for someone else to sort of start jumping up and down about it, and nothing happened. So I thought, stuff it, I better do something myself. So hence the program and the book. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think there's a little phrase that goes around where people are told you've got a touch of sugar. Oh, I've just got a touch of sugar. I'm thinking, it's just not a touch of sugar.
Yeah. No. And the other thing is that people don't understand that sugar is everywhere. They think sugar is putting 2 spoons of sugar in your cup of tea or cup of coffee. And the number of people that say to me, "Oh, I don't eat much sugar," and then you go through their diet and they have fruit juice and they have cereal and they have honey and jam and so before they've left home in the morning they've already had more sugar than they should have had for the whole day. And all those processed foods that just about every processed food contains sugar. People have no idea. Things that we always thought were healthy, like fruit juice.
Processed food industry is so sneaky because they can just, they rename their sugar. They don't call it sugar. It's got 50 other names.
Breakfast cereals, brilliantly marketed, they're just basically cereal flavoured sugars, but, little Johnny's walking on the supermarket aisle with mum and there's this brightly coloured, animals and, oh, mummy, I've got to have that. And they're very good at it. And things like, fruit yogurt and muesli bars and barbecue sauce and all these things that people are totally unaware are just full of sugar. So, yeah, it really is. Sugar is everywhere. And it's all about the processed food, really, processed and ultra-processed food. I mean, we didn't exist a generation or two ago, and neither did most of these diseases. And, I think the stats now that we get something like 60% of our salaries calories from ultra-processed food, it's just... so we've just got to get back to eating real food. That's the trick, isn't it?
Absolutely. And your slip of the tongue there on the salaries versus calories is actually probably a headline, because the processed food industry is making a bucket ton of money at the expense of our health.
And they don't care. They're not worried about our health. All they're interested in is profit. And they're brilliant at it. Processed food industry has basically got us all addicted to sweetness. And, they just crank up the sweetness level on all the foods to the bliss level that their tasters decide on. It's the ideal amount of sweetness, and away they go. It's a bit of a stretch to even call them foods. They're really sort of chemical concoctions that are dressed up to look like food.
Yes.
There's no nutrients in them. We eat food for nutrients, and most of these processed foods, unlike real foods, like meat and fish and fruit and veg and so on, which are full of nutrients, all sorts of different nutrients. These processed foods are devoid of nutrients, and all they do is satisfy your sort of immediate hunger. Taste very nice. They're very cheap, most of them, so it's very attractive. And then 2 hours later, they make sure you're hungry again because there's no actual nutrition in there, and so away we go again. You have another snack, and then you have another meal. You have another snack, and away we go. And the food industry again, have hijacked the dietitian and the pharmaceutical and medical industry. They've got us all convinced that everything in moderation is fine. They've got us all convinced you've got to have lots of small meals every day. They've got us convinced that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. All these sort of myths of which there is zero evidence for them. But, the average punter out there believes them because they've been so well marketed. And, much as I hate to admit it, I sort of half admire them, in that they're incredibly good at the marketing. They've basically managed to con the whole world into giving up real food and taking up this rubbish. You've got to, that's a pretty good effort.
Absolutely. And in fact, I reckon the master of that is the product Up and Go, who have convinced us that not only do we not have time to make breakfast, we don't have time to eat it. So just drink this product and you will get all the requirements that you need for a healthy breakfast. And so people are drinking it or feeding it to their kids, and it's a disaster.
Horrible stuff. There's nothing healthy in it at all, and it's got hasn't it got 4-star rating or something like that? That's a joke.
Yeah.
That's the
I know.
That's been hijacked by the food industry, and it's basically letting the fox into the hen pen, isn't it? Really, it's just yeah, it's a real issue. And, we've got two choices, Lucy. We can either sort of sit back and accept it and accept that we're just going to get fatter and sicker as time goes on. And then people complain about the costs of health and all that sort of stuff. Or we can have a crack at it. And it's people like yourself who are out there spruiking it and doing a fantastic job. And we've just got to be more people doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's a disconnect between people and food, medicine and food. And, Mary and I are always talking about real food is medicine. It kills me. There's actually a doctor in the UK who's written a book called Food is Not Medicine. I just think, oh my God, seriously?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's funded by someone that, has an interest in that line. That's the other thing is, all the food research and so on. and all the most dietitians now are employed by the food industry, so they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. Of course. So they've basically just bought off the whole food industry, the whole dietitians and a lot of doctors, and if they haven't already been bought off by the pharmaceutical industry and so on. So it's a nice little thing, isn't it? Like, eat crap food and then you'll get sick and you'll need my drugs. So it's a nice little combo. The old food and pharmaceutical industries, two of the most ruthless, profit-seeking, industries that you could find, and neither of whom have any interest in people's health, and just purely interested in profits for their shareholders.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I will use in my brain, when my brain suddenly sort of decides that it might like to eat a packet of Tim Tams, I will remind it that it wants to do that because it's been marketed to, because that product has been engineered to reach my bliss point, because I've been told it's going to make me feel good, because it's an iconic biscuit legend that I've been conditioned to believe is, amazing. And it's all a bit of BS.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to love Tim Tams. They were always a treat. Especially out of the fridge. You used to like them in the fridge. They're cold. They were good. But I'm as guilty. For 60 years of my life, I'm as guilty as anyone of being sort of seduced by all this nonsense and this propaganda, and I was a sucker. So really, I'm sort of trying to make up for lost time, to be honest. But they certainly had me conned. There's no doubt about it, and I'm just very grateful that for someone like Tim Noakes and so on to point it out to me, because it's changed my life, and I've been able to influence a few other people as well, which is very rewarding. I don't think I've ever done anything in medicine as rewarding as getting people onto a good diet and seeing the changes that it makes for them. You get incredible feedback and you see the changes, and the number of people, I'm sure you have this all the time, you and Mary, Lucy, that, people contact you and say, it's changed my life. That term, changed my life. You hear that time and time again. And the tragic thing is that it's such it's just a small minority, and the rest of people are just blissfully ignorant of what's going on, and until it's too late. We don't develop type 2 diabetes, when we're 50. We start developing it when we're 30. And it's a lot of long, hard work to get there. You've gradually got to become insulin resistant, and surely we're better off, just tackling it at the start, and that's what disappoints me about governments, about medical bodies, about the dietitian industry, and so on. There's such an opportunity there to educate the public and to institute, things like taxes and advertising restrictions and education in schools. And there are so many things we can do that would have an impact. And yet, again, the food industry is just too powerful, and there's no government or profession that's strong enough to stand up to them, unfortunately.
No, I know. And it's, often we've talked about the idea, because I sometimes think people are blown away by the idea that the government aren't actually looking after them. And it's like, well, the problem we have is that the government's job is to stay in government. That's their idea of the job. And the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry both fund and sponsor the governments of the day. And so if you actually stop, that means your opposition will get double the funding and they're going to boot you out.
Yep. Yeah, I know. It's a sad reflection on our society. And, I don't know what we can do about it, other than just keep chipping away and to keep producing the evidence, because, the one thing we've got on our side is the science. But unfortunately, there's so much corrupt science out there too that, paid for by drug companies and food companies and so on. And they get the results they want, but sometimes I just think that, we're bashing our head against a brick wall. It's a waste of time. And then other times, I get a, message from someone saying, you changed my life. You think, oh, okay, all right, I'll keep going for another week.
Yeah, keep going, yeah. And you know what? It's interesting. People connect to people. So if there's people like you out there who are in the public, who are engaging, who people want to follow, then that's how we change things. I know the science is clearly important, because then as upper regulated doctors, we have to have evidence for what we're recommending. But most of the public don't care that much about the science. They start reading things and turn off. So it's really therefore, I think, about getting out there into the community, as you do so very well, and talking to people and inspiring them with stories.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I'd rather not do all that. I mean, believe it or not, but I guess as many people have said to me, and I get it. So I've got a bit of a profile through my sport sort of thing, and I can leverage that profile maybe into getting a bit more sort of publicity and promotion for this sort of thing. So I'm obviously happy to do that because do whatever it takes, but it shouldn't be me. I'm a sports medicine doctor. I shouldn't be talking about type 2 diabetes, and I'm sure the diabetes specialists are probably saying, what does this guy know about, But someone's got to, and it's got to be people like us, who are doing it. And that's why this roadshow is fantastic, and all your program, and we've all just got to do what we can do, and I'm just doing my bit with I can write and I can speak. So I think, okay, well, I'll write and speak. You guys are fantastic at the sort of, running programs and so on. That's what you do well. We've all just got to do whatever we can do to contribute to the cause, I guess.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, at the end of it all, the bit of medicine that I found soul destroying, and I had a little chat with Gary Fetke earlier, and he found soul destroying chopping people's feet off. Like, that would be an awful job. And I know James Mukey seeing people go blind, and for me it was just doling out scripts, because that's the medical model that we've got. It's short consultations, high turnover. You've got this, right, now we need to add this medication, just adding. You're never actually making people... Nobody ever came in and said, gee, doc, after those 5 pills, I feel fantastic. Like, no one said that. But people would come in after, doing 3 months or even less, like 6 weeks of low carb, and go, oh my God, I feel amazing. You go, yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's certainly the most rewarding medicine that I've ever done, and nobody ever thanked me as much for fixing their knee or their ankle or whatever compared to this, and it's so many different areas of medicine. It's not just diabetes or not just weight loss. I had someone come up to me recently and thank me for getting their husband who had bipolar, off all his medication, and said, "You've changed my life. You changed our lives." You think, wow. And they'd tried every drug, possible and so on. And people with arthritis and epilepsy and Parkinson's and, all these sort of things that, aren't really talked about much as a potential for low carb. It makes a huge difference to people. And mental health, there's more and more evidence now that diet is a major factor in mental health. And, all these things are just becoming more and more common in our society. And as our diet gets worse and worse, our chronic diseases get worse and worse. And hasn't anyone put, one and one together and got two? It's pretty bloody obvious that diet is a major factor in why, we have so much chronic disease. And the sooner we acknowledge that and do something about it, the better. But for some reason, and I think it's partly ignorance. I don't know about when you did medicine, Lucy, it was long after me, but, I don't think I got a single lecture in nutrition in my medical course. A bit of biochemistry and things, but nothing about actual food. So doctors don't know anything about nutrition, and the public assume they do, and they really don't. And you stick to your comfort zone. And, as you mentioned, your doctor's comfort zone is writing scripts, to handing out drugs. A, they don't have the knowledge, and B, they don't have the time to sit down and take someone through, their diet and so on, because that takes time, and they don't understand it. So in a way, it's sort of ignorance, really, that the medical profession just don't get diet and exercise and other sort of areas. It's all just, we're just trained to write scripts. That's basically all we do.
And I think part of the problem is that traditional diet was low fat, low calorie. That doesn't work. It's unsustainable. It's unpleasant. Nobody likes it. And then people go, oh, no one wants to exercise. So they do a little tip of the hat, which is, well, of course, you've got to go and diet and exercise. Then they move on to their spiel. And it's, I often say diet and exercise, if you're using it as eat less and move more, it can be unhelpful. But at its crux of eat better food and move a bit more often, that can be miraculous.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny, people often sort of say, oh, you've got to exercise to lose weight. But sometimes, you actually got to lose weight to exercise. You get onto a good, healthy diet, you actually feel better. So you have more energy, you are a bit lighter. And so I did a lot more exercise after I lost my weight than I did beforehand, because it was just much more enjoyable. You felt like doing it, you had energy and so on. So I think sort of diet comes first, and then that encourages you to exercise, and that whole thing of you can't outrun a bad diet. I mean that you can run all you like or do exercise, but if your diet is rubbish, then good. And I think you're right. I think those low calorie diets have probably given dieting a bad name. People sort of because as you said, I mean, I defy anyone to last too long on 800 calories a day. I mean, it's just you get hungry. You get hungry and angry, and it's just not sustainable. And so you do that for a while. You lose a bit of weight. It's effective. But you give up. You then put on more weight. You finish up being heavier than you were. You yo-yo diet and so on. And people say, "Oh, no, diets don't work." Well, that's not right, because the great thing about, sort of reducing carbs and focusing on healthy fats and proteins is that you're not hungry, and because it's carbs that makes you hungry and it's protein and fat that fill you up. That was the very first thing I noticed when I went onto the diet. I stopped being hungry. Instead of sort of having your cereal at 8 o'clock in the morning and getting to 10:30 thinking, "Oh, Christ, is it lunchtime yet?" You'd sort of you'd have bacon and eggs and avocado and you wouldn't eat again all day. And I went from eating 3 meals and 3 snacks a day to eating 2 meals a day, which I do to this day. And so hunger is a huge underrated sort of issue, I think. And carbohydrates are made to make you hungry. You have that burst of blood sugar, and then it drops, and I'm hungry again. So of course I've got to eat every 2 or 3 hours, and which suits one particular industry, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I was never a person that liked breakfast. But whenever I was, on a health kick, I would have breakfast because, that was what you're supposed to do. And without fail, I would be then hungry at 10 a.m. Whereas when I didn't have my breakfast, I wasn't hungry till lunchtime. But I felt guilty skipping breakfast because,
Yeah. Well, most important meal of the day. Absolutely. Very important, according to Mr. Kellogg and co. Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely peeps. Peter is speaking at a number of the low-carb conferences, including Tasmania, Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. So if you would love to come and meet him, listen to his talk, you can come to any of those conferences. But more importantly, and he's just released a new book. It's fantastic. And as I said, I really think it should be just like a book in everyone's house. So lots of people they buy those books when they're pregnant. I remember buying, What to Expect When You're Expecting, and that sort of still sits on my shelf somewhere. And this is really one of those books. Our epidemic of diabetes is massive. It's not going away anytime soon, but this book will help revolutionise your life.
Well, thanks for that, Lucy. And I must admit, I'm really looking forward to the low carb roadshows. They'll be terrific events, and I always learn a heap of stuff myself. And hopefully, I can send some messages out there as well. So I look forward to meeting everyone there. And that's the best thing about it is the people you meet. It's such a great group of people that come along, and always love chatting and chatting afterwards and over lunch and things like that. So looking forward to it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Lovelies, we will have the links to Peter's book in the show notes, as well as the Defeat Diabetes program. Again, another brilliant program. If you have type 2 diabetes or certainly a family history of it, just crack on and have a look at that. Lovely ones, have a beautiful day today, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks very much. So, my lovely listeners, that ends this episode of Real Health and Weight Loss. I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
And I'm Dr. Mary Barson. We're from Real Life Medicine. To contact us, please visit rlmedicine.com.
And until next time,
thanks for listening.
The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualised medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.